Thank you. Thank you, Agatha. Catherine, Musakali, welcome. Evangelist Modupe. Very big welcome. And our partners, KEPSA, our sponsors, to whom we're very grateful, Kenya Airways, NMB Bank, Tanzania, Zambia National Commercial Bank, and then, of course, all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen, friends, staff, BCA, Strathmore. Welcome to Strathmore. It's very hard speaking after an evangelist. You know, he's been sent from above by God. I mean, how can you match that? But just looking at what we're talking about today reminded me of a few stories. One is about something, and Agatha was trying to avoid people dating themselves and showing how old they are. But I'm going to ask the question anyway. Has anyone ever heard of a Walkman? Okay, so those who've heard of Walkman, you know, you've just dated yourself. We know how old you must be. Now, the thing is, it was a revolution. It was an amazing technological revolution to be able to listen to music in something that you're carrying with you. So when I was just born and growing up, you had to be somewhere. There had to be a music system. There had to be a jukebox. The concept of carrying your music with you and you choosing, maybe a radio, yes, but like carrying something like your own jukebox that you could choose which songs to play was unheard of. But the Japanese came up with it. It doesn't sound surprising now. You know, Japan's just downgraded to like the 4th biggest economy, but for a while it was even the 2nd biggest economy in the world. So we're not surprised when we hear about Japan and the great work that it does. But it wasn't always like that. There was a time when Japan was just getting into this market, and they were trying to break into the American market and to sell their electronic instruments there. And there's this story I was told about somebody who was trying to sell this Walkman to an American roommate who was with him in that university. And so he sold the idea to him, told him this is an amazing gadget, and he was asked, where was it made? He said, Japan. Is it any good? Yeah, try it out. And he tried it out, and it was a flop. So he brought it back to this Japanese student and said, this thing doesn't work just as I expected. I mean, can anything good come out of that place? And if there's one thing the Japanese are high on, it's a sense of honor. And so this student sent it back to Sony in Japan with very harsh words, saying, you let down our country. You embarrassed our country. How could you make something so badly? And they, of course, made it up to him. They tested the next one really well, sent it back to him, give this one to that American. And, of course, it was perfect by the time they did that. And with that sort of an attitude, they built a name for themselves. And now when you say made in Japan, it means something. You don't expect any shoddy work once you have that stamp, made in Japan. Now we're looking at made in Africa. Okay, so we're talking of made in Africa with a vision. Because right now, if you say made in Africa, it doesn't have the ring we're giving to it. It has a different ring to it. People will say, oh, then it can't be any good. It's probably the worst of the worst of the worst. So you might even have said made in South America, or but made in Africa? It has a different ring to it. And we are trying to spin that and change it and take it to where it should be. Now, how do I know that I'm not making this up, that this is what people think? It's because I spent several years living in New York. And I took a lot of hits for you guys. Seriously. There are times when people didn't even know I'm from Africa, so they felt comfortable to say all sorts of things. And then I would stop them and say, guys, I'm from Africa. And then they'd politely sort of retreat. Or they would just say, you know, these guys are a mess. How can they not figure this out? And they would give me what I called a backhanded compliment. So it's a compliment and a slap at the same time. So it's an applause and it's also a slap in your face. So they'd say something like, how can Africa have guys like you and still have the kind of problems that it has? So how are you supposed to react to a statement like that? Are you supposed to say thanks for the compliment? As you abuse my continent where I come from, you're complimenting me? I mean, it's embarrassing. So what I would do is I would fight back. I'd tell them, gosh, you guys know so little about Africa. You're so quick to make a judgment. You don't even, have you ever been to Africa? No, then you don't know what you're talking about. And I was fighting back, but deep down I knew that I should be saying touche. That criticism you leveled at us is true. We are chaotic like that. We actually do mess around like that. But in order to defend you guys, us guys, I used to pretend they didn't know what they're talking about. And because I was clearly an authority, I come from Africa, how can they know it better than me? I would silence them by just using authority. But I knew that if we actually went down to the data, they'd be right, I'd be wrong. But at the back of my mind, as I was taking some of these blows, I was saying, I'm going to make you guys pay for this. So I'll come back, and it's different when you're under friendly fire. Okay, not the type that we were told where people actually die. But you'd rather take an insult from a family member who tells you, you know, you're doing poorly, than from someone out there who tells you you're doing poorly. It hurts more when it's from out there. When it's friendly fire, people criticizing you from within, you're more receptive. And so I said, I'm going to pay it back by telling you guys what I really think about you. And then you deal with it. So here's an example. Every election cycle, some politician somewhere in Africa will promise people water, electricity, roads, like it's some amazing thing that it only takes people, special people like him or her to deliver. Like it's some really special challenge, and I'm the one who's going to finally deliver it. And what we forget is some of the things they're promising us were already delivered 2,000 years ago in other places. So I've been to the city of Rome. They have these aqueducts bringing water into the city of Rome. How old are they? 2,000 years. They have the Colosseum. It's a stadium. So never mind, I'm not comparing with the huts yet. I'm not talking about the huts that we live in, the mud huts with no electricity and water. I'm talking about the Colosseum. This is a stadium. It's a 3-story stadium, again built like 2,000 years ago. And what would these Romans do on a Saturday afternoon? Would they go to the movies? No, they wouldn't go to the movies. They would go to the Colosseum, which was engineered in such a way that you could get all the spectators to move to the 3rd level. It's hermetically sealed. You pump water into the stadium to the 2nd level, and then you bring in battleships and you reenact an actual maritime battle. It's better than the movies, by the way. So you're watching a real battle, and then when the show is over, you drain the water down. People come down and say, oh, that was a nice piece of Saturday afternoon entertainment. They were using water for entertainment. You're not being promised drinking water by some politician. These guys were playing with water 2,000 years ago. Why don't we have water? It's because we let ourselves listen to such promises, when instead we should just get up and do it. And all it takes is a will to do something. You know, bold, we have those words, they are bold actions. So if I was like 20 kilometers away from water, I wouldn't do what we see in these pictures. They're showing some poor African carrying a jerry can, going 20 kilometers and coming back, or 10 kilometers and coming back. Just call the villagers around and say, guys, there's water. It's just here. And you know water travels down. It's a principle. So if we are downstream from wherever that is, we just need to dig a channel. Now, if you dig your 100 meters in front of your hut, and you dig the next 100, and you dig the next 100, and you dig the next 100, in 1 year's time, or in a few months' time, we have water here. We don't have to carry these jerry cans. We don't need any politician to coordinate us. We don't need anyone. We just need our brains, our desire to work. Basically, you just need a leader. Someone will stand up and say, guys, let's coordinate this. Let's do it right now. And it's just that, you might call it desirable impatience. There's a kind of impatience that is okay. You shouldn't be impatient with people generally, but there's a certain dose that is healthy where you're telling people, how do we live like this? How do we let ourselves live like this? You mean we can't do something about it? And then we all get up, we coordinate ourselves, and we do it. So that's what leadership can do for you. And so I'm very thrilled that with this particular conference, we're trying to redefine what it means to say, made in Africa. So we want to change the narrative. We want people to hear something else when they hear made in Africa. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen just because you want it to happen. You have to do something, and the best way to do that is to invest in leadership and to go to those leaders and to show them this has happened in other parts of the world. It's actually happened in Africa. We can do it again. Dr. Modupe was telling you about his just reaction when he saw this auditorium and thought, gosh, yeah, this is happening in Africa, done by Africans. So it's possible. We have these examples. We can actually tell people that we're already changing the narrative. And then we have to get that narrative out there. But we'll have to be bold. I'll give an example of, since we're talking so much about the military today, there's the Special Forces in England called SAS, Special Air Service. It's a top secret special unit. They don't talk much about it. It's a bit like the Delta Force or the SEALs in the US. And I love their motto. So their motto is just 3 words: who dares wins. So they are taught that courage wins, that unless you take bold actions, you're not going to go anywhere. And so when we look at the sort of problems that we face in Africa, we can easily think, this is beyond us. There's nothing we can do. And that's the problem. Our problem is we don't have enough impatience to get up and say, no, I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm not going to wait for the next generation.